There we go. Sorry about that. Not your fault, Kurt, my fault. Good morning, everyone. So good to be with you. If somebody can help me with this stand, I just need it to get a lot taller so I can put it in front of me. That would be great. No rush, no rush. Thank you so much. Come on, let's give him a hand. Plays piano, fixes stands. Thanks. It's good to be with you. It's always something I look forward to every semester gathering. I'll be here today. I'll be here tomorrow, hanging out on campus, and I hope to connect with some of you. So a few weeks ago, my family and I had the opportunity to go on vacation. My wife and I have 3 daughters, 16, 14, and 11. And we went down to Disney and had a great week in Orlando. It was like 65, 75 degrees every day, which is perfect for Disney. And, you know, Disney is known for a lot of things. It's known for the fireworks show at night. It's known for the parades. It's known for the characters, the hospitality, the customer service, the food. But I was really excited to try out some of these roller coasters because there were a bunch of roller coasters at Disney that weren't there the last time I went. And so I got some pictures of me and my family on some of these roller coasters for you. This first picture is the Guardians of the Galaxy ride at Hollywood Studios. This was a lot of fun. We had all agreed ahead of time that we would be praying, but then we just forgot about that when the ride took off, and so only my nephew Dima remembered. That's why he's doing that. So this was a great ride, a lot of fun, highly recommend. However, if it was 30 seconds longer, I think I would have thrown up. Like, I realized during this ride, I'm not built for roller coasters anymore. This next one is Tron. This is the newest one at Magic Kingdom. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. That's, like, I'm only that happy either when I'm riding Tron or eating. Like, that's like the only time you're ever going to see that expression on my face. It's wild. You're sitting on it like it's a motorcycle, and it is fast, and it is so much fun. And then we went on another roller coaster. It's a smaller one. It's an older one at Magic Kingdom called the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train roller coaster. Here's a picture of us going down. It says my wife's in the black shirt, my sister's in the blue shirt. That's me in my Liverpool kit. And then next to me is my youngest daughter. So she's 11. Maddie has cerebral palsy, so she's a little smaller than a normal 11-year-old. But she was big enough to go on this ride. Did I send you the picture of her face zoomed in? Do we have another one? Can you see it? Does it? It is just like, when I sent this to my friends, I had to say, she's having fun. Because, like, the first response is, this is child abuse. Like, you can't put this kid on this, because that is sheer terror in her face. But I assure you, the second the ride was done, she was like, I want to do it again. It was her favorite ride. And that's the thing with roller coasters, right? You got the ups and downs, you got the moments of joy and ecstasy, and then you have these moments of fear and terror, and then in my case, sickness and nausea, and it's sort of the ups and downs of a roller coaster. And we have a term that we use, emotional roller coaster. An emotional roller coaster obviously gets its name from the same idea that in life, there's ups and there's downs. One day you're feeling great. The next day you're feeling terrible. Your morning starts off miserable, but your afternoon gets better, the ups and downs. And this morning's story in Mark chapter 5 is an emotional roller coaster. It's an emotional roller coaster for the reader, yes, but even more so for the people who lived this story. It's an emotional roller coaster of hope and despair. And I just want you to see how this story goes back and forth between hope and despair. So it starts with despair. There's a man named Jairus. He's a ruler in the synagogue, and his 12-year-old daughter is on her deathbed. I mean, that's despair. A parent who is watching their child die. That is the sort of the epitome of despair. He comes to Jesus, and Jesus goes with him. There's hope. Despair to hope. Then we meet another woman. She's crawling through the crowd to get to Jesus. It's despair. She's had this issue of blood, this disease for 12 years. She's been sick as long as this little girl has been alive, and she's spent all her money and put so much effort into getting well, and she isn't. It's just despair. And then she touches Jesus' robe, and she's healed, and there's hope. Despair to hope. But then Jesus stops the crowd and says, "Who touched me?" Despair again. She doesn't want to be known. She doesn't want to be noticed. She doesn't want to get into trouble. And then Jesus calls her daughter. Hope. Despair, hope, despair, hope, despair, hope. And then Jairus' friends come to him and say to him, "Don't bother the teacher any longer. Your daughter has died." Despair. Jesus looks at Jairus and says, "Do not fear, only believe." Hope. They go to Jairus' house, and outside there's mourners who are weeping and grieving the death of this young girl, despair. But Jesus walks right into this death scene and lifts this little girl to life. Hope. Despair, hope, despair, hope, despair, hope, despair, hope. This story is an emotional roller coaster. But so is life, right? Life is an emotional roller coaster. And I don't know where you're at on that roller coaster. Some of you maybe are in despair. Some of you are in hope. Some of you are in between. But when we ride the emotional roller coaster of life, when we are bouncing between hope and despair, the question that often comes up in our hearts and our minds the most is, where is Jesus in all of this? Where is he? And I want us to see from this story that Jesus is with us, that Jesus stops for us, and that Jesus stands above us. He goes with us, he stops for us, and he stands above us. Let's talk first about Jesus goes with us. Verse 22, let's look closer at the story. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet, this desperation. And he implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be well and live." And the first 5 words of verse 24 says, and Jesus went with him. So Jairus is a ruler of the synagogue, which means he was a lay leader responsible for the administration and organization of that local community's synagogue. And Jairus is respected, and he has connections, and he has influence, and he probably has some money. But none of that can help him now because his 12-year-old daughter is lying at death's door. So he falls at Jesus' feet and he begs and he hopes and he believes. And what does Jesus do? Verse 24, 5 words, and he went with him. I want us to notice that Jesus went with Jairus. No questions asked, no demands made, no info gathered, but also no guarantee given and no promises made. Jesus never says, I got you. I'm going to go with you and I'm going to heal you. He just goes with him. I think when we're in despair, we would like Jesus to come with guarantees. We would like Jesus to come with promises. And what we really need most is for him just to go with us. In our darkest, most difficult moments, we want guarantees, we want promises, we want answers. But what we often most want is someone just to go with us. This Friday will be 1 year since my mom passed away, went home to be with Jesus. And she spent the last 3 years of her life battling a terrible disease called ALS. And I watched it steal her voice from her. And I watched it steal her ability to eat from her. And I watched it steal so much from her. And I watched it steal her life from her. And when I look back on that season and when I think about my mom and the way that she suffered and the way that she lived her life at the end, when I think of the rest of her life, I think I got like a college level education, how to follow, trust, and serve Jesus. When I look at how she lived, I feel like I got that sort of undergraduate level education on how to love Jesus. But when I watch how she died, I feel like I got a graduate level course on how to trust Jesus, how to love Jesus, how to serve Jesus. Because she knew that serving Jesus doesn't come with promises and guarantees that you're going to get out of everything that you get into. But she knew that Jesus was with her. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he's with me. He goes with us. Jesus goes with us into our pain, into our doubts, and into our questions. He is willing, he is present, and he is near. And one other thing, he is uniquely qualified. Jesus is uniquely qualified to go with you into your darkest moments. Hebrews chapter 4, the author of Hebrews says this. Verse 14, since then we have a great high priest, speaking of Jesus, who has passed through the heavens, the ascension of Jesus Christ to the right-hand side of the Father, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. Our confession is Jesus Christ. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Jesus knows the temptations you're facing. He knows the struggles that you're facing. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Jesus is willing. Jesus is present. Jesus is near. Jesus goes with us, but Jesus is uniquely qualified to go with you wherever you're headed and whatever you find yourself in this morning. I know this is Missions Week for you, and about a month ago on winter break, I went with my 2 oldest daughters to Santa Marta, Colombia, And we were down there working in churches and schools and feeding programs. It was amazing. It was the first time getting to take my oldest daughters overseas on a short-term missions trip. And while we were there, our host missionaries, Isaiah and Heather Maddox, who are graduates of UVF, or at least I know Isaiah is, and were youth pastors for a while in New York, they hosted us. And, we loaded up onto a bus every morning, and we went into communities and places that, if I'm being honest with you, I didn't always feel safe. Like, if some of this stuff was a little bit sketchy, and I wasn't sure where we were going, and I never knew where the building was, and I never knew anything about it, but we just kept going to these new places. But the reason why I had some confidence is because Isaiah and Heather were with us, and they'd been there before, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew where they were going, and they were with us. I didn't know what they knew. I didn't have their experiences, but they were with me, and it was enough. I had never been there before, but they had already been there. Jesus has already been wherever you're headed. He knows where you're at. He knows your struggles, your questions, your pain, your doubts. He can sympathize with your weaknesses. He goes with you. Here's some things we know from the Gospels about Jesus. Jesus was misunderstood by his closest followers. He was opposed by his own family. He was rejected in his hometown. He was betrayed by his friend. He was denied by one of his closest friends. He was abandoned by nearly all of his followers and friends in his hour of need. And then he was falsely accused and tortured and crucified. Jesus has already gone where we're headed, and he goes with us. Friends, whatever darkness, difficulty, or distress you might find yourself in this season, Jesus has already been there, and he goes with you. Secondly, Jesus doesn't just go with us, Jesus stops for us. So we meet this second woman. She's been suffering for 12 years of this issue of blood. And Mark actually uses this word mastix to describe her suffering. It's a word that means whip, lash, scourge, or torment. It's a Greek term that actually combines this idea not just of sickness, but of shame. She wasn't just sick. There was a shame associated with her disease, her sickness, and how long she had been sick. There was loss of relationship. There was loss of status. There was loss of access. She had spent all of her money. She had got her hopes up, suffered from the cures that were supposed to help her, and now she's worse off, and she's desperate, and she's in a place of despair. And somehow she's heard about this Jesus, and she believes if I can just touch his garment, I can be healed. And so she pushes through the crowd, and we often envision her sort of crawling around, on the ground to get to Jesus through this crowd that is pushing in on Jesus. She touches his garment, and she is immediately healed. Great story, right? She got what she wanted, and she didn't slow Jesus down on his way to go help this dying girl. Win-win. But in verse 30 it says, Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" She didn't stop Jesus. Jesus stopped for her. And it says that she immediately was filled with fear and trembling. She doesn't want this to happen. She wants Jesus to keep walking. She got her healing. She doesn't want the attention. She doesn't want the notice. Why? The reason why she's filled with fear and trembling is that she was breaking social and religious norms by touching Jesus. Let me explain. According to Leviticus 15:25-27, a person with a bleeding condition was considered ceremonially unclean. And anyone that person would touch would then become ceremonial unclean. It's like an old school game of cooties. Like if you got it and you touch someone, they got it. So by touching Jesus, she risked making him ritually impure, which could be seen as a serious offense. But here's what else is happening. What did Jairus ask Jesus to do back in the beginning of the story? Jairus said, "Come and what? Lay your hands on my daughter so that she might live." If Jesus is following this Old Testament law about ceremonial cleanliness, he technically, being touched by an unclean woman, could not have laid his hands on Jairus' daughter until he went through the purification process of bathing and waiting until the evening, and she would have been long gone by then. So what this woman does is a big issue. But Jesus stops for her. Why did Jesus stop for her? And I think the reason why Jesus stopped for her is because she wanted one thing, but he wanted something else. Listen, friends, the woman wanted something, but Jesus wanted someone. The woman wanted relief, but Jesus wanted a relationship. The woman wanted a healing. Jesus wanted a daughter. And if she was only healed, that would have been great. Her sickness would have been gone. But what about her shame? And with one word, Jesus looks at her and gives her more than a healing. He speaks to her identity, her value, her worth, her feelings of shame. When he looks at her, and what's the first word he says to her? Daughter. Daughter. Listen, when Jesus stops for us, we got to get this right. When Jesus stops for us, it's not just to give us gifts. It's not just to give us healings. It's not to make us feel better about ourselves. It's not to give us direction in our life. It's not just to clarify who we should be with and who we shouldn't be with and how we should. When Jesus stops for us, he stops for us to call us son or daughter. He wants to speak to our identity, our value, and our worth. And you might have all the blessings of heaven, but if you don't hear Jesus calling you son or daughter, you're in a bad spot. Jesus stops for us. What do we learn here about faith in this story? It would be easy to think that this story provides a formula on how you can get healed, right? You're sick, you need a healing, well, you just got to press through. You got to press through the crowd, you got to fight past everybody, you got to grab hold of Jesus' corner of his garment, and then you're going to get healed. But the stories like this don't provide us formulas because God is not a program, God is a person, right? And N.T. Wright about this passage says this. He says, was it Jesus' power that rescued the woman, or was it her own faith? Clearly it was Jesus' power, but he also says to the woman, what? Your faith has rescued you. So the answer must be that faith, though by itself is powerless, is the channel through which Jesus' power can work. He's not a magician doing or conjuring tricks by some secret power for an amazed but uninvolved audience. He is God's Son, the one through whom the living God is remaking Israel, humankind, and the world. We heard Sophie say that earlier. And faith, however much fear and trembling may accompany it, is the first sign of that remaking, that renewal, that new life. So Jesus' plan to remake and renew and restore and redeem all of creation is something that we can partner with in our expression of faith, right? Our expression of faith does not make God do things, but God allows us to partner with his work by placing our faith in his plan to make all things new. And when the faith of his people and the sovereign purposes of God align and connect, we see things like this. And it's the signs of the kingdom that is already, but not yet. It's here, but not fully. And we see it: healings, miracles, restorations, salvations. But what I want you to notice is that this woman's faith, it's not perfect faith. You can't hold this story up as an example of perfect faith, because we know she's not as interested in Jesus as she's interested in what he might do for her. She would have gladly let him keep walking. Some commentators actually say that some of the things that she does was more superstitious than spiritual. And one thing is for sure, that a desperate woman is willing to do anything. This is not perfect faith, but I hope that encourages you, because even if this morning you feel like your faith is weak and trembling, as long as you place it in Jesus, he can use it. Because what matters is not the amount of our faith, but the object of our faith. Let me say that again. What matters is not the amount of our faith, the quality of our faith, the perfection of our faith, the passion of our faith. Those are all good things. They're not bad things. But what saves you, you can have the greatest faith in the wrong thing and it won't save you. But if you have the littlest amount of faith in Jesus, it's enough. Mustard seed faith. So if you're here this semester and it's starting to wear down on you, I know it's March and it's been winter and there's signs of springs. Man, it's awesome being in Pennsylvania because you got way more signs of spring than we have up in Syracuse, New York right now. What did we see yesterday? What were those cherry trees blossoming in Philly? We were like, life. But maybe inside you feel like this is a grind and the novelty of college has worn off and the fun of new things is behind you. And you feel like your faith is being tested, and you feel like you had stronger faith last September than you have this March. And my encouragement to you is just take whatever faith you have and place it in Jesus, because it's not the amount of your faith, it's the object of your faith. Shaky faith, unsure faith, up and down faith, inconsistent faith, faith weaker than before faith, just keep directing it to God, to the Jesus who goes with us, and to the Jesus who stops with us, stops for us. And then lastly, we see in this story that Jesus stands above us. Let's look at verse 35. Go back to the story. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." As a parent, I just can't imagine a worse moment. I just cannot fathom worse news. your daughter, who you love, is dead. Why trouble the teacher anymore? And then he turns to Jesus, and again, Jesus doesn't really give him guarantees or promises. All he says is, do not fear, only believe. One of the commentaries says this: Jesus speaks directly to Jairus. There is still one thing Jairus can do. It seems like he is out of options, but listen, there's one thing he can still do. He must shift his focus from the circumstances of his daughter's death to Jesus himself. Don't be afraid, only believe. This is the challenge before Jairus and before everyone who meets Jesus, to believe only in what circumstances allow, or to believe in the God who can make all things possible. Only one thing is necessary: to believe. And this word believe is in the present tense of the Greek imperative, which means don't just place your belief in Jesus once, but hold on tight. Keep believing. With respect to his daughter's circumstances, Jairus' future seems closed, but when Jesus is involved, it's still open. Faith is not something that Jairus has, but something that has Jairus, carrying him from despair to hope. And faith is not just something that you and I have. Faith is something that holds on to us, that has us, that carries us from despair to hope. Hold on. My youngest daughter, Maddie, was little. I mentioned earlier she has cerebral palsy. Her left arm and left hand work as well as yours and mine, but the rest of her appendages, her legs and her right arm, really don't work well. And when she was little, and even still, she needs to be carried where she goes, you know. And so she would sit on the ground and she would look at me and she'd put her left hand up and she would say, "Daddy, I hold you. I hold you." And, you know, of course, she can't hold me. I'm a grown man. Like, look at me. Like, she can't hold me. But what she really was saying was, will you hold me? So, of course, I'd pick her up and put her in my arms, and she'd grab hold of me and hug me, and then she'd say, "I hold you. I hold you." Sometimes we think we're holding on to God so strong. He's holding on to you. I mean, the only reason you and I can hold on to God is because he's holding on to us. It's not your hold on God that makes you secure and safe. It's his hold on you. So faith is not just something that we have. It's something that actually has us. And then Jesus looks at Jairus and says, have faith. Do not fear. Only believe. Like, what does faith look like on a day like this? I know sometimes when we think about faith in the Christian circles, we think about like prophesying and healing people and seeing miracles and signs and wonders and telling mountains to move and all this sort of crazy, you know, exciting stuff. And there may be seasons of that. But, you know, when you're in the valley, faith just looks like getting up out of bed again. I mean, when I've gone through seasons of loss in 2017, losing my brother and my dad back to back, when I went through seasons like that, faith for me was not about getting to church on Sunday and hooting and hollering and getting. Faith for me was just like, Jesus, I'm just going to trust you to get me through another day. And I feel like Jairus in this moment says, Jesus, you were willing to go with me, so I'm willing to go with you. And when you're at your lowest moments in life, sometimes that's all you're going to be able to say. Jesus, I trust that you've been going with me. I'm going to go with you. Whatever's next, I'm going to take that step. That's faith in the face of these sort of moments. And they say to Jairus, stop bothering this guy. Stop bothering the teacher. It's interesting because they call him teacher. So my girls are, again, 16 and 14, my two oldest ones, they come home with their homework and they want me to help. And I've been useless to them for a long time, especially when it comes to math. Like, I was great at math in high school, but that was a long time ago. And math is different now. So I thank God for ChatGPT, because I just say, just ask ChatGPT. Just take a picture of your problem, throw it in there, tell them to explain to you like you're 7 years old. And it actually does. But like, they know like, Dad can't help me with math, so they don't go to me anymore. Because I'm not a math teacher. I'm not a math expert. There's other things they will go to me on, but not math. And if you see Jesus as a teacher only, you're not going to go to him when your daughter's dead. They said, don't bother the teacher any longer. And technically, they're right. If Jesus is only a teacher, this situation has exceeded his capabilities. Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher any longer. If Jesus is only a teacher, he can't help. If Jesus is only a good man, he's maxed out. He can comfort you. He can walk with you. But your daughter's dead. A teacher isn't going to help you. A good man isn't going to help you. A moral person isn't going to help you. An ethical example isn't going to help you. Even a healer is not going to help you, because this person doesn't need a healer. They need the resurrection and the life. They're dead. And all they see Jesus is as a teacher. And if you only see Jesus as a teacher, you will only trouble him with things that you think a teacher can fix. And if you only see Jesus as a good man, you will only trouble him with things that you think he can speak to. And if you only see Jesus as a nice person who came and lived a good life, then you will not go to him in the worst moments of your life. But when you see that Jesus walks onto the scene and Jesus is the resurrection and the life, then even when you're facing death, you can go to him and know that you can put your faith in him. End of the story. They get there. The mourners are in place. Jesus says, what are you guys all upset about? The girl's only sleeping, and they laugh at him. Now, sometimes sleeping was a euphemism for death, but not here. Jesus hasn't even observed her yet. The mourners are in place. Like, this girl is dead. So what is Jesus saying when he says she's only sleeping? This is what I think he's saying. That Jesus is saying, when I'm on the scene, when the resurrection and the life shows up, when I'm with you, then death is no stronger or scarier than a nap. He walks into the room. Taking her by the hand, he says to her, Talitha Kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking. She was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. I'm going to ask the keyboardist to join me up here. In this story, Jesus stands above both women. He stands above the woman in the crowd, and he stands above this girl as she lay in her deathbed. But in history, Jesus stands above all. He's holy. He's set apart. And what I want us to see in this final scene is I want you to take a really close look at Jesus face to face with our greatest enemy, death. And I want you to notice, first off, what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't roll up his sleeves. He doesn't start thumping his chest. It doesn't say that he gets loud. He doesn't work himself into a frenzy. He doesn't get sort of emotionally worked up. He doesn't start screaming. I want you to notice what he does do. He gently reaches right into death and pulls this girl out like he's just waking her up from her sleep. He's face to face with our worst enemy, and he doesn't even have to flex. He just reaches in and says, oh, death? Not when I'm here. And he pulls her up from her sleep. Why? Here's why. Listen closely. Because death is no rival for Jesus. This is not an equal match. This is not an equal match when Jesus shows up. This is the mismatch of all mismatches. Because Jesus stands above death. Jesus stands above despair. Jesus stands above discouragement. Jesus stands above whatever problems you're facing, whatever situations are weighing on your heart. Jesus stands above all. And when he reaches into our lives, whatever death we're experiencing, he can gently pull us right to life. That's how good he is. That's how powerful he is. He goes with us, he stops for us, and he stands above us. Last thing I want you to notice is these two women are so different, right? You got this old woman near the end of her life. You got this young girl at the beginning of her life. One's been sick for 12 years. One's 12 years old. I heard it said this way. For one woman, for the woman with a sickness, it's been 12 years has been too long. For Jairus, 12 years has been way too short. One is chronically ill. One is acutely dying. In fact, Tim Keller says about this passage, this is medical malpractice for Jesus to stop for this woman when he's headed towards a girl who's young and has an acute situation. One is alone, fighting for herself. The other one is supported, has a whole bunch of people fighting for her, including her dad. One is pursuing Jesus. One is being pursued by Jesus. One reaches out and touches Jesus, and the other one can't because she's dead, but Jesus reaches out and touches her. And we have this wide spectrum of these two women. Why? Why did Mark put the story this way? Why did this happen? Because this woman and this girl remind us that wherever you're at on that spectrum, there's hope for you in Jesus. Wherever you are, there's hope. Keller urges readers and students of this passage, you got to see yourself both in Jairus and in the bleeding woman. Because faith can involve humility, persistence, and trust in Jesus' timing, even when God's way seems confusing or his timing slow. How do you think Jairus felt when he realized this woman slowed Jesus down and my daughter died? Faith means trusting God even when his ways seem confusing, his timing seems off, because Jesus is always working for our glory and for his good. And this story ultimately points to the transformative power of the gospel, that Jesus conquers sin, conquers sickness, stands above death, and as he stops for us, he calls us son and daughter. In this story, Jesus reaches into death to bring life to one, but a few chapters later in Mark, Jesus will enter fully into death himself to bring life to all. And if he went all the way to the cross for you and I, then he will go with you into your darkest hour. And if he stopped for this lady and for Zacchaeus and for the lepers and for the blind and for the hurting, he will stop for you. And if he stands above even our great enemy death, then he stands above you. And look up and hear him saying, son, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Let's pray together. You're sitting here and you just know that you are more on the despair end of things than the hope end of things. It doesn't mean your life is falling apart. Maybe you just feel stuck. Maybe you're just lacking some motivation and some hope. I want to pray for you. If you're willing, would you just lift your hand up in the air if this is you? I just want to pray for you. I just want to see who I'm praying for this morning. Just put your hands up, just saying, I'm in a place where I need more hope. I'm feeling stuck. There's a struggle. Maybe there's a circumstance here, but maybe there's a circumstance back home. Maybe you got a family member that's facing something and the weight of that is so heavy on you. Maybe you got a friend that is struggling with something. God, you see these hands this morning. You see their hearts. You know where they're at, and you know the weight that they're carrying. Pray that you would remind them of the words of the Apostle Peter in 1 Peter 5:7, that we can cast our cares upon you because you care for us. Jesus, you're the one who came, and the prophet Isaiah said that the government itself shall rest upon your shoulders, which means the outcome of all things, the outcome of history itself rests upon you, Jesus. And your shoulders are strong and capable and faithful. And so I pray right now for every person in this place that needs to have a sense that you're with them, that they would see that you are Emmanuel, God with us, that your spirit, you sent your spirit that we would never be alone, to dwell with us and to bear witness to our spirits that we belong to God, so that our spirits cry out, Abba, Father. Strengthen them, encourage them, bless them, and keep them. Bring friends around them, church family around them. They can walk with them in this season. And when you bring them out, Father, let them not just say thank you, but let them look for opportunities to then go and encourage others who are in the valley. That our struggle will become a source of ministry and strength for others. Because what you do in us, you want to do through us. Help us, Jesus. Bless your name, God. I want us just to respond with just whatever we'd like to sing. Let's just stand together and just sing through some of this song. Direct our hearts toward Christ in our time of singing.
As I called, you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. I called, you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. I called, you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. So in my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high in my life.
Jesus, thank you for hearing us. And I called, and you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. One more time we sing, I called, and I called, and you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. Jesus, I pray that our hearts would always be filled with deep awe and gratitude that you rescued us. You called to us in our lostness. You woke us from our lostfulness. And you extend to us grace and mercy. You give us the gift of faith to place in you. This rescue plan is you from A to Z, from beginning to end. The only thing we've contributed is our need to be rescued. Jesus, you did it all. You go with us. You stop for us. You don't just want to give us stuff. You want to have a relationship with us, son, daughter. And you stand above all. And so whatever we're facing, we can trust in you. We thank you for that. Amen. Amen. If you raised your hand this morning and just said, I'm in a season, here's my last encouragement to you before I dismiss. Find a friend, a trusted person today, and just say, hey, I just want to share with you what's happening in my life so they can walk with you and pray with you, all right? God bless you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.